Are you somebody who tends to get the blues around this time of year? Or perhaps you feel societal pressure to start the new year off strong? Or perhaps all of this new year motivational talk makes you realize how lost you feel? That only touches the tip of the iceberg. But if you're somebody who feels any of this and more around this time of the year, this is the video for you. Hola my beautiful lotus flowers, welcome back or welcome to my channel. If you're into nerding now on everything astrology, spirituality, and self-transformation, this is the community for you. The theme of today's video is disconnecting to reconnect with yourself before 2023 or at the beginning of 2023, depending on when you're watching this. And I just want to preface this by saying there is no specific time frame. You can do this anytime. But since we are at the end of the year and entering into a fresh year, I thought this would be a great time to release this video when a lot of us are probably feeling the pressure of having certain goals and starting certain projects, and we also may have seasonal blues because it's winter time, etc. As many of you probably know, I took a long break from YouTube the last few months of the year, and if you want to know more about that, you can watch this video that I released a couple weeks ago updating you on everything that has gone on. But one of the things I talked about in that video was embracing imperfection and no longer feeling like everything needs to be absolutely perfectly curated for me to put it into the world, and paying less attention to the technical aspects of what I do, and that carries on into my everyday life as well, because I've always been a creative and I kind of lost that creative inspired aspect of what I was doing. And a big reason I was able to regain my confidence and that spark and that renewed mindset towards YouTube and my life in general is because I disconnected, and I disconnected in order to reconnect. And I know that that phrase is super broad. Before I keep rambling, let's go ahead and get into the video. The first step that I took in disconnecting to reconnect is getting back into the hobbies that I do purely for fun. It can become easy to find ourselves in a toxic loop of self-improvement and productivity. And I realized at a certain point that I had started hyper-criticizing and analyzing myself and how everything I did or said aligned with my quote-unquote growth. And this honestly becomes exhausting. And this mindset can take over your subconscious without you realizing it if you're not careful. And I started to internalize this need to always be growing and always be productive, in the sense that everything is self-development and whatnot. And I didn't fully realize that that was happening until I started noticing my physical response to certain situations. I started noticing that things would trigger anxiety, like the moment I would wake up and I would be like, okay, so I gotta meditate, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. And it started becoming so rigid. It was in noticing that physical pattern in my body, which, thank you body for speaking to me and letting me know that I was doing way too much. But it was in noticing that response that I'm like, hold on, what's causing this? And I realized it was this constant need for growth, like self-growth, that I had started to ingrain in myself. And in realizing this pattern, I also realized that I hadn't done things that I actually enjoyed that are considered completely quote-unquote unproductive in so long. And I put unproductive in quotes because it is productive if it's helping us reach fulfillment and helping us reach happiness. Because as much as self-growth is definitely necessary, we need to nurture the part of ourselves that just wants to have fun. Humans are amazing, complex beings, and we are definitely not here just to be these machines of growth and productivity. And I'm sure that's been said a million times, but I want to reiterate that because I truly feel that if you strip away all of the rigid constructs that we've created in society, I think at everyone's core, we all just want to have fun and be happy. And that is basically what all of us are trying to achieve in our lives, right? Is a feeling of fulfillment in the sense that we get to have fun, we get to be happy. but we have so many things that tend to pull us away from doing so. So returning to these activities that we do just for fun and setting aside time to do things that we just find fun is not unproductive at all. I definitely have to give a big percentage of the credit to this activity, to returning to fun hobbies, for bringing that inspired spark back into my life towards everything that I do. The second step is to quite literally disconnect. Literally. The internet is a really fun and cool place in a lot of ways. When I was in my teens, I spent a lot of time on the internet. I'm somebody who really thrives on the internet. I tend to have always had a natural inclination towards the internet and building relationships and playing things on the internet and whatnot and having that virtual world. So I'm not degrading the internet, but even though there are a lot of things to appreciate about it, we as humans have a tendency to overdo things or overuse things in a way that's more harmful than not. So when we're constantly connected and engaged with the entire world, from the moment that we wake up, we are intaking information, responding to people, listening to music or news or podcasts, etc., whatever it may be. But when you think about it that way, there's always noise in our brains. Like, really stop and think about that for a second. There is always mental noise. And if there is not necessarily mental noise, there is a physical noise. We are never in complete silence, even though moments of silence are very necessary for our mental health, our happiness, everything. And we don't realize that because we've become so bombarded with noise in our everyday lives. It's become normalized. What happens when we have so much mental noise that we are constantly bombarded with is that we end up blocking our own voice out, our own mental voice, our own intuition, whether it's intentionally or not. And we, over time, probably don't realize that it's happening to us. And the result may be a constant feeling of tension, agitation, anxiety, etc., that has actually accumulated from this constant chatter that we never get a break from. Although with my YouTube channel and my presence on social media, I do actually need to be engaged with the internet in some consistent way. And I realized that my mental health was more important than any fears that I had around distancing myself from the internet. Fears of being forgotten, being seen as a failure, a flake, people losing interest in me, the algorithm losing interest in me, etc. It just got to the point where the technical aspect of it, the numbers, the analytics were now another constant noise in my brain. But you want to know something really funny? Really funny. Listen. So the first month that I decided to just drop most of the internet, I was still somewhat present on Instagram, but not as much as I normally would have been. But I completely stepped away from YouTube. I stopped going into the analytics all the time. And after a month, I had gotten myself out of the habit of looking at like what my revenue is going to be, where my revenue's at, etc. But the first month that I step away and I don't pay so much attention to it, I go back to look at my revenue for the month just because I wanted to know how much I should be expecting to receive that coming month for financial reasons. And I looked and I was like, now hold on. I stepped away. I didn't upload anything for that month, and my revenue increased. It increased. Alongside that, some of my other analytic numbers, not just my revenue, had increased as well. And I was like, okay, universe, I see you. And I was like, thank you so much for the reminder that I'm getting so caught in my own little human mind, my own logical brain, that I forgot the universe has my back and I'm doing what I need to be doing. I am being way too harsh on myself. However, it's important to note that even though I was very grateful for this, I also realized that I cannot place so much power into the highs and the lows. Like, the highs and the lows were having way too much of an effect on my psyche. And even though the highs are something I will be grateful for when the analytics go up, there's inevitably going to be dips or times where it plateaus. You know, everything is constantly changing and nothing ever stays perfectly the same. So that means there's always a constant dip happening. And I need to not give so much power to not just the lows, but not the highs either. I need to realize that it just is and remain present in what I'm doing. What am I doing today to fulfill my goal or to fulfill my creativity or find my happiness, etc. Rather than, oh, where are the numbers at? Oh, they're low? Great, my self-esteem is going to be low now. Or, oh, they're high? Great, my self-esteem is through the roof until the low happens again. Taking that time to step away from the internet, to literally disconnect from your devices. And you don't have to completely, but just change your habits around your devices. You know, allow yourself certain screen times. Notice how much and slowly wean yourself off of how much you are on these screens and on the internet, and start to monitor the way that you feel. Your physical reactions reveal a lot about how you've adapted to certain situations, whether for better or worse. So notice how you physically feel when you start to do this. Or do you feel anxious? Do you feel sad? Or like, are you starting to feel happier the less and less time you spend on your screens, etc.? So this was a huge thing for me, huge, especially as a creator. But I know that you don't need to be a creator for the internet to affect your mental health in all the ways that I described. If you're enjoying this video so far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell, because it will help this video reach so many other people just like you who need this information, and then you have more people to talk to about it, you know? And if you have a word for 2023, leave it below. I have a word for 2023, and my word is fulfillment. So just pick a word that basically embodies what 2023 means for you and leave it in the comments below if you feel comfortable sharing. The third step is to organize your internal and external space. Now, it has probably been said a million times in these New Year videos and in many other videos, but I'm still going to say it again. This is the time of the year, even though you can do this any time of the year, but this is definitely especially the time of the year to go through those tasks that you have been procrastinating. Clear those tedious tasks from your to-do list and clean your physical and digital space and your mental space. To get yourself into the motion of clearing things out and get yourself into that energy, I recommend starting with cleaning your external physical space, because that feeds into cleaning your internal space, your mental health, your emotional health. It gives you greater mental clarity, because so much of the excess clutter and attention that we experience is from our physical space, from how our external is. So take the time to throw out the things you've been meaning to throw out, and take the time to clean up the things you've been wanting to clean that you've been putting off. And if there's something you've been wanting to organize, or maybe you've moved and you haven't put away those last boxes, but it's been in the back of your mind, cluttering up space in your mind because you know you need to do it, that this is the time to do it. And most likely this is the case for me anyways. I don't know, we're all different, but for me, when I start like cleaning externally and cleaning my space and cleaning my car and things like that, it puts me into that vibration and that energy, and I then want to do other things. Another thing that I recommend is your digital space. This is the time of the year where I like to organize my videos from the past year, put them into a folder, make sure they're all on my external hard drive, and I like to organize my workspaces like my Notion space. Our digital space is another physical space that we don't realize how much mental clutter it actually causes, because you start getting all these apps and you start taking all these pictures in your phone and all these videos, and before you know it, all those little things have built up, and now your phone is low on memory and it's running slower, and you're stressed because you're like, oh my God, I took so many screenshots, I downloaded so many images, I like took so many pictures of my cats. And it just becomes another space to be overwhelmed. So taking the time to clear out the pictures you don't need, or moving pictures and videos and content from your phone to your laptop or to an external hard drive, or deleting the apps you no longer use, getting rid of subscriptions you no longer need or you no longer deem necessary to have. All of that is going to help you a lot when it comes to, again, clearing that mental space by clearing your physical space. Another thing for me personally, when it comes to clearing like mental space by getting some things in the physical realm in order, is finances. Finances are something that for a long time, because I was living in survival mode for a while in my early to mid 20s, I was living in major survival mode, and there were a lot of things about finances that I found out the hard way. And I actually took, being a typical Pisces, I took the route of running away from it. I didn't want to look at my credit score. I didn't want to try and budget because I did not want to know how much I was making, because I was working my butt off, and I didn't want to see those numbers because I was afraid of how much it would stress me out and it gave me anxiety. So I just avoided it completely. Which is, take it from the soon-to-be 28-year-old, that is not the way to go. I highly recommend sitting down and looking at your finances. Look at those numbers and just be honest with yourself. You don't have to be crazy. It might help you to, again, decrease your mental clutter at the end of the year by looking at those numbers and getting them in order for 2023, so that way you can reach the financial goals, or at least have some financial clarity. I could sit here and talk about the internal practices that will help you clear your internal space, but things like meditation and journaling and stuff like that, but those are things that I've talked about many times, and they're not really the focus of this video. But I think doing those physical, more material ways of clearing out your space will help you begin those practices as well. It'll start you on the hamster wheel in the right direction. The fourth and final step is to slow yourself down and take things in tiny, teeny weeny steps if needed. Part of the process of reconnecting with myself was slowing down and returning to the basics of everything that I had started doing, from meditation to stretching to my routines, etc. I realized that the way I had been carrying on my daily routines was no longer working for me, and it was totally okay to slow down and reevaluate and feel out what works for me now. Like I said earlier, things are constantly evolving and changing, and everything has constant dips, and whether it shoots higher, lower, etc., things are always evolving and changing. Humans are a great example of something that is constantly evolving. We are constantly changing unless we prevent ourselves from changing, and change is good, and we want to embrace that. So maybe in 2022, you lived a certain way of life that was working for you, but it no longer resonates, and that's okay. So sitting down and self-reflecting on what it is that doesn't work for you anymore, and reevaluating how you can move forward and realign with yourself through your routines, through your practices. Maybe like for workouts, for example, maybe you really loved weight training, but like you don't feel inspired anymore. You don't feel inspired by weight training anymore, and you still love working out, but you lost that inspiration. So maybe reduce the amount of weight training you do and start taking up a different type of workout and see if you like it. An example for me was that for a while, when I first started doing YouTube, I had a certain type of schedule set up that was sustainable for me back then. And mind you, I started in 2020. So I'm very different now than I was in 2020. And I realized that like over time, that's what was making me feel so burnt out and uninspired, was partially because I was trying to keep the same vehicle moving that I had back then when it's time for a new one. I no longer fit that vehicle. It's no longer sustainable for me, and it's okay. I had to realize it's okay to realize that. There are a million different ways that we can all be productive and find fulfillment. And if the way that we find those things changes, that's okay. That's awesome. If anything, it's great, because that means you're growing. For me, I had to simplify things and return them to the smallest steps, because for a while there in 2020, when I was out of a job and I was doing YouTube, I had a ton of time. So I built myself up to doing 20 to 25 minutes of meditation, and I was doing it every day. I was stretching every day, like doing all these things. And when society started to kind of rev itself back up and start to get more back to normal, if you will, I realized that putting the pressure on myself to do 25-minute meditations every day was preventing me from the most important thing, which is meditating at all in the first place. It doesn't have to be 25 minutes. If it's only 2 minutes, that's a win. That's awesome. But feeling like having this all or nothing mindset, where if I can't go all in 110% with the task, I'm not going to do it, which I tend to do a lot. Guilty as charged. Don't do that to yourself. It's not necessary. Break everything back down into tiny steps if you need to. Or like even with the gym example, if you need to reduce your workouts, if you've been feeling tired and worn out and you need to reduce your workouts or feel like you need to go back to the basics, that's okay too. If you need to reduce your gym time to 20 to 30 minutes instead of being there for an hour and a half, because you thinking like, oh my God, if I go to the gym, I have to be there for an hour and a half. If that's preventing you from going to the gym at all, nope. No, reduce your time, because just reducing your time and going to the gym in the first place for just 20 to 30 minutes is way better and still a massive win compared to just not going at all, because you have this self-inflicted pressure thinking that you have to go hard in the paint and go all in if you go to the gym. And obviously, I'm not saying don't put forth effort, but it's okay to readjust the amount of effort you put forth. As long as you are still putting in the effort, you just need to find out what works for you. I really hope by the end of this video that you feel a bit more confident about your approach to 2023, New Year activities, goals, etc. Let me know if any of what I've talked about resonated with you, and if you can relate to anything that I spoke on, because if there's one thing I know, it's that when we feel heard and understood, that's one of the most positive, powerful feelings in the world. So letting people know that you feel what they might be feeling in the comments will help a lot of people. Once again, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell if you haven't already, because I know you want to be part of this community. Like, come on now, come on. And if you haven't watched either of these videos, they may also help you out and be useful, so be sure to check those out. But until I see you in the next video, thank you so much again for being here. Adiós.